So, first, thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate you agreeing to sit down and talk with me. Um, so, first, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience a little bit?
Sure. My name is John Hornor Jacobs. I'm a writer and novelist. I've written, I don't know, at this point, 10 or 11 books. I've had fiction in Playboy magazine, um, CBS on Huffington Post, CBS Weekly. Um, I uh, I don't know. I write books and and stuff.
A lot of books. So, on that topic, so I was doing some research because I didn't want to try to. I'm trying to avoid asking the same questions that get asked in every interview. But I read that your first novel, Southern Gods, you wrote it when you were 37.
Yeah.
Um, So was Southern Gods just the first writing to find success, or was that something where you came back to writing after some time away?
The latter. I wrote a bunch in college. Even went so far as to going to like a writer's workshop in at Bennington College in my, I think, junior year of college. I wrote a bunch of short stories back then. Um, None of them, yeah, I've reread some of them that I still can find. They're not terrible, but they're just juvenile. I mean, none of them were genre. They were more like Southern fiction and crime fiction. Um, and and then it wasn't that I got discouraged because at the time I didn't know anything. Coming out of college, I didn't know anything about how to submit to magazines or what I would do. I had no knowledge of what to do, and this was like in the early '90s. Um, so I just went on to other things. Like I was playing in band. I do a lot of creative things. So I was playing music in bands, and I got a job in advertising, being an art director. Like life happened, and it wasn't until I had settled down, had a family, and as you said, I was 37 that I decided to like get back into writing again. Um, uh, and then it was at that time, the main resource was the internet. When I first started writing, when I was in college, like learning how to publish, you would have to buy like a book called, How to Publish Your Novel, or like 1,000 novel markets or something like that. Like I don't remember that there was a whole series of books that had some titles similar to that
Mm-hmm.
that I never bought, but I would always see in the bookstores. And I just didn't, there is the sort of unfortunate thing about being a writer is if you are a writer and you want to succeed at it, you also have to be a student of the industry of publishing, which is probably one of the most backward ass industries known to man. It is really, it still works on this antiquated system that they established early in the late 1800s and early 1900s, whereas any bookseller could return any unsold books to the publisher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what industry does that? Like, I mean, unless it's like consignment. I mean, it ultimately is sort of a consignment model.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't tell you at any time how many books at any one time they've sold. It has to be like quarterly, figured out quarterly. And I promise you, a Coke distributor could tell you down to the number of units how many Cokes they've sold.
For sure.
But because they don't have this wonky system of like, hey, the convenience store, any Cokes that the convenience store it doesn't sell, they can give it right back to you. And it's like, and publishing houses will literally, instead of like taking the books back, they'll literally have them rip the covers off, remainder, and then they'll just remainder them. They don't have like a big warehouse. The warehouse is too expensive. It's just publishing has not caught up with the times.
Yeah.
It's starting to, but it's just a bizarre industry.
a lot of folks uh, that are interested in writing have trouble finishing it,
Yeah.
actually getting a book done. Whenever you finished NaNoWriMo and you won, how did you continue without the pressure of that like daily goal and those check-ins and things? How did you actually get your book finished? What
Yeah. Okay. After I finished the first one for Southern Gods, the National Novel Writing Month thing, I had 50,000 words. I spent probably the next. It was like around Christmas, so I kept writing and I made good progress. I I kept writing for the next 3 months, and despite it being Christmas, I found more time to write. Because I had a week off and all
Mhm.
that stuff. You have more downtime, and so I wrote more. And about 3 months later, I got to the end. And that's the deal, folks. I hate, that's the real hard thing. The great thing about the National Novel Writing Month is when you write, you're writing fast, you're writing a lot, and you just don't have time to edit as you go to make it perfect page by page. So perfection is the enemy of creation. You have to you have to be sort of like a draft horse with blinders on either side where you're just not looking back. You have to permit yourself to write shit. Yeah, and not worry about it and be content and comfortable enough that you're going to fix it later. But right now, we're just getting through this. We're getting to the end. All first drafts are crap. It's the second and third draft in the editing process that takes this hunk of crap, or this unseemly rock that you then polish to a high sheen. And some people are just incapable of doing that. And I don't know if it's, I don't know, some people have a real hard time to sort of barging ahead full bore without really much introspection in daily review. It's real hard for them. The only sort of, when I did National Novel Writing Month, and when I write pretty much first drafts of anything, I only review it enough to know where I was, or to get like figure out some detail I might have forgotten or something, and I'll go back. But then I keep going until I get to the end. And then what you don't, so as a writer, you don't have anything until you get to the end. It used to be, you used to hear about writers selling unfinished manuscripts on the strength of the first 3 chapters or first 50 pages or first something, but they hadn't finished the book, and get like big deals from that. But publishers are so risk averse now; they don't do that anymore. The only time they sink money in a author with a unfinished manuscript is when that author's a known quantity. So it happens a lot in nonfiction, where an author who has published something before will say, "Listen, I have this idea about doing like one of my David Brown, a good friend of mine. Also, we share an agent. He's a science writer, and he like went to Antarctica, and he wrote. He's like, he sold the book before he wrote it." For a nice amount of money, because he was actually on the scientific expedition to Antarctica, so he's going to write it about it. And he has articles in scientific magazines, and articles about JP&L where he was embedded, and so it was like he's a known quantity with a track record, and he sold this book without having written it, because it's like, sure, this guy, we just look at his CV and see that he can do it. But when it comes to fiction, the only people who can do that are people who have sold a lot of books. Stephen King could go to any publisher and say, "Listen, I think I'm going to write this book about this. What do you give me?" And they'll be like, "We'll throw a bucket of money at him." The thing about Stephen King is he doesn't want a bucket of money. He doesn't take advances. You know what he does? He says, all right, I get half the money. You take care of all the other stuff, and I get 50%, because he knows that. And I don't think people might not understand how outrageous that is, but like, I think I get like, my cut is like anywhere from 8 cents to 12 cents on a dollar. So 8 to 12%
Right.
of the profits made. And all those profits uh, go into paying off the advance. So until the money they paid me up front is paid off by that 8 to 12 cents a book,
Mm-hmm.
or a dollar that's made on the book, like I'm dead weight to them, right? Stephen King can just roll in and say, "You're not going to give me an advance." Like he doesn't need the money. I don't need the advance, but I'm going to take 50% of. You're going to handle all the production, all the distribution, the editing, the art, all that stuff. You're going to handle everything. I'm going to write this book and take 50%, and like any publisher will still jump at it, because that's the selling power of Stephen King, or Janet Ivanovich. I don't know what her deal is, or James Patterson. Like those are the people who have the selling power,
Mm-hmm.
or J.K. Rowling for that matter. She's, even though she's turned out to be terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, we're talking a lot about publishing for some reason.
So I'm curious. I read in an interview you said that it took you your career so far to really start to find your writing voice. You said it took you like 10 books to finally find
Yeah.
it. How would you say your writing has changed now from when you started?
Um, you know, I might have misphrased that, in the sense that here's the way I normally specify. I normally talk about how I think I've grown as a writer. Um, I'm just feeling more comfortable in my writing ability now. I'm feeling more confident in how I, that I can write and spin a story, and it be to like an a quality that I'm not ashamed of. So here's the way I explain that. Normally, when you have a creative idea, and it doesn't matter if it's like you're thinking about carving a block of soap or a piece of wood into something, or writing a song or whatever, you have this sort of ideal in your mind of how it will turn out. And in writing, for me, it's a lot of the times those things are, the climax, the sort of feeling of the book, the denouement, the tone, and the sort of atmosphere of the book, and all the sort of moving parts. Like, if I was going to say, like, the book has this kind of feel, that's what I'm shooting for. And often, I'll have real specific things, like, here are the characters, and here are the plot points, and here's how we're going from here to here. But often what I'm really shooting for is, like, thematically an idea that is bolstered by atmosphere and tone, and a prose style.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start and it's good to, when you start a project, to sort of write those things down, or try to verbalize them in some way to yourself, at least. Take a piece of paper and to say, like, I want this to be, these things.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're done with the project, there's often a distance between the ideal you had, the generative ideal you had when you started the project, and the actual result. And as an artist, every artist, if they're worth their salt, will judge how far away those two sort of poles are, those 2 points are.
Mm-hmm.
And they will make adjustment. They will say, like, okay, on the next book, I'm like, where did I go wrong? How did I get this far away? So when I look at my earlier works, I see how far away Southern Gods is in the end result than it was from the ideal that I had in my mind. And every book I've worked since then, I've worked to sort of bring those two poles closer together. They're never, ever really that close. and for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the distance is wonderful because it shows that something happened in the writing and it went in an interesting other direction, and that made it a better work. But a lot of the times it's just because, as artists, we're struggling with our craft. We're trying to get a mastery of our craft. And often it's just like if you're ever learning how to play guitar, sometimes if you play guitar, the chords, the chord shapes, and you're trying to render a song, but you can't make the chord changes fast enough or whatever, and you get really frustrated with your inability to make your hands do what they want, even though you know what they should do.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that is the same thing that every artist has. I've had many conversations with musicians, and I am a musician, but not like a super awesome professional one. I've had many conversations with my uncle J.O. Buckley, who's like a world-class painter, and we always do the same things where it's like, you analyze your art, your completed works of art afterwards, not while you're doing it, afterwards, to see how far away you came and where your mistakes are, and you only see the mistakes. And people will say that's, again, a lot of times people, when I say these things in panels, people will say that seems like a very pessimistic way to look at these things. And I'm like, it's the only, if you want to become better, that's how you do it. You examine where you sort of went wrong, or what you could have done better, or what, what it could stand for some improvement. So the artist who is totally content with their product will never get any better. Mm-hmm. I mean, they just won't improve. And I hope I'm on a path becoming I'm not gonna say a great writer, but a really good writer someday. And that's how the way you do it is you examine your work with a critical eye. But and it's weird because in the writing of it, you have to turn off that critical eye. You have to turn off the critical voice and just bushwhack through it and figure out how to get through it. I mean, it's being a writer and being an artist in general is just there's just inherent contradictions in it, because
you brought up music, and you brought up that you know the chord changes and you know what you need to do, but you can't do it fast enough. I know that a way that you could improve or at least challenge yourself as a musician is to play in a key you don't normally play in, or play at a tempo you don't normally play in. What's the way you can do that as a writer?
First, the best way to do it is to read extensively and out of your comfort zone. So if you write horror, if you write fantasy or science fiction, if you write romance, if you write whatever, if you write some sort of genre, read outside of it. Read nonfiction, read mainstream fiction, read literary fiction, read classics. Look at how they do things. That will give you examples of how many other authors have tackled similar problems that you've done. Because so my deal is, I don't know if I buy into the whole 10,000 hours makes you of doing something makes you a master, at it, or an adept or whatever. But I will say that 10,000 hours of working on something can't hurt. and reading counts towards writing. So what feels right when you're writing it. Like when you're in it, when you're in the weeds, struggling, it feels good. When the path opens up before you. Sometimes the path opens up before you. Here's some of the pitfalls that I found in myself is some of the pitfalls are doing things that are predictable, that are pat, and that could be plot wise. It could also be just in your word choice and diction. Like instead of saying, see, I've this is all personal in process, because on the one hand, there are writers out there who use these whose writing is full of of cliche and all those things, and they sell 1 billion copies because most of the reading public in America wants their books written at an eighth grade reading level, and that is just like, statistically, you look at the best selling novels, and they're written at about an eighth to 10th grade reading level, which is not like it's not like it is written. The prose is written in a easily digestible way for the lowest common denominator. And I am not bagging on those authors, because writing that way is really, really hard. And kudos to them for selling 1 bajillion copies and being able to do that over and over again. That shows a level of craftsmanship that is just as high as any sort of literary mainstream writer. It's hard for me to do that psychologically. Like, so here's one of the sort of weird things about writing is, you have a long relationship with your book, in the creation of it, and you have to be engaged and excited about that. And for me, like, trying to write at an eighth grade reading level for over the course of 6 to 12 months would just drive the enjoyment out of it for me. Mm-hmm. So I am always searching for the most interesting way and the most unique way and the most perfect for this character, if it's first person or third person sort of limited, to like say it the best way I can that perfectly fits my tone, my atmosphere, my character. Like that is sort of like the meat of the nut that I'm trying to get to. And for other writers, they like totally are like, no, I'm trying to do the exact opposite. I'm trying to make it as easily palatable. I'm putting this in a blender and blending it until it's absolutely smooth, and they can drink this out of a straw, and it will be delicious. And granted, there's more of a demand for doing it that way than the way I do it, but they don't have to live with my book or me during the creation for it, and that's just not interesting to me. So, in some ways, I might be shooting myself in my own foot because of like my own artistic sort of. And I won't even say it is standard, because it's not like they have just as high standards. It's just of a different value system. But it's just I gotta live with what I'm doing. I gotta I gotta be me. I have to invest me into it, and that's the only way I could do it. And that just wouldn't be true to myself as an artist. So yeah. So those are some of the things that I grapple with. Back to your question, those are some of the things that are some of the mistakes I made along the way to sort of getting to where I feel comfortable. And it's not even, I never really truly feel 100% comfortable, because I'm always somewhat dissatisfied with what I'm doing. It's just, in my earlier books, sometimes I was willing to sort of take the easy way just to get it, just to get through it, right? And I can see that when I like look back at the prose or whatever. And it's like, oh, right, I can just read this paragraph and say like, I did not read this paragraph aloud. I did not examine it for like repeated word. It's just like a lot of like little tricks and things you learn over the course of, and I've only been really, really working at it since 2000 late 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. That's really when I really started trying to be a writer. So for me, that's recent memory. For my kids, that's like most of their life.
And that's really recent for a lot of folks. There's a lot of folks who are deep in a career, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know that one of the things that seems to be really common across a lot of your work is that you draw on history a lot. You seem to be really into history. So first, I know that you've done some like actual like historical fiction. How much research do you do before you start jumping into something like that, and how do you keep track of it all?
Well, I mean, one, I like the physical book, so usually my bookcase by my desk. I have like usually we're sort of in transition between houses right now, but normally I have a small bookcase by my desk that's really just full of like the research I'm doing for like the current project
Mhm.
and the probably the upcoming project, and sort of then like also the wish fulfillment project that's like a ways down the line that I've never really, maybe not, I won't get around to, but I have an idea for. Like if you look at Election Seething Hell, like because the research for that was so demanding, um, I listed source books in the back. So there's maybe 15 or 20 books for each of the two short novels contained in it, and more. Like, I actually have a membership to JSTOR, which
Oh yeah.
is the academic journal sort of place that lets you read papers, academic papers. So I didn't include any of that because, one, I'm not like citing, I'm not like citing. I don't have to include stuff.
Right.
I'm a novelist. I can just say, here's my novel, and I've used all this historical data. But I wanted to, like, part of it is just not just for veracity, just to show that I've done my due diligence.
Mhm.
I've worked hard to make sure that this is factually correct,
Mhm.
including having sensitivity readers, so that I'm not you know, offending people with just out of ignorance.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I work pretty hard at it. I really enjoy it. I enjoy writing historically. And the other day I was sort of talking about it, and I realized I think I enjoy writing historical fiction uh, because there are no cell phones. I just like, there's so much that can just be solved. So much conflict could just be solved in most fiction pre 2000 by just sort of characters communicating effectively with each other.
Mhm.
And a cell phone would have solved all that. It happens all the time in screenplays. Screenplay writers twist themselves into knots trying to figure out ways for people to lose cell reception, especially in horror movies.
Yep.
Oh, we're just not getting it. This valley has terrible reception. Oh, okay, well, whenever you hear that in a movie, at some point the character is going to need to just call somebody, and they're not going to be able
Yep.
to. You know. So, that was sort of joking. I like writing in historical fiction just because, you know, I like. I think a lot of times I like the idea that there are frontiers still. A lot of my draw to historical fiction is that there are empty places in the world where things lie that we might, lurking, that we might discover.
Mhm.
Because the way the world is now, of course there are things that can be discovered, but they're usually like on a micro level
Mhm.
and not on the sort of like larger sort of human level, except in space, right?
Yeah.
There's always space. So science fiction is something. It's just that science fiction takes a level of science fiction has a more rigorous standard when it comes to like understanding science and
Mhm.
whatever, or at least the type of science fiction I like, hard sci-fi. So I just have never really gotten around to writing it. I have a few ideas. Someday I might attack, but I like writing historical fiction. Most of the stuff I sort of am fascinated by are periods, or like, um, yeah. For right now, that's what I'm interested in. Um, that's not to say that it's what I'm always going to be interested in. I did write in Election Seething Hell, one of the novels. It was a framing, like, so one of the novels has a story within a story within a story,
Mhm.
and the framing story of it was set in modern times. And I have to say that it was so easy to write the framing story because I didn't have to research anything. I didn't have to look anything up. It was just describing the world and what people do. And it's not like, okay, how did they clean their teeth? How did they wipe their ass? How do they, like what kind of clothing do they, like all these details that like any, like you have to know, even if you're going back 50 years, like how much did a hamburger cost? How much, that stuff is easy to figure out. But suddenly when you go back to the 1800s, and like I'm writing a book in Hungary and Romania right now, in like 1880, it's like, holy crap. I can't, like, there's not a paragraph that goes by where I'm not like, should I include that detail? Because I don't know if that detail's right. And it slows down the writing, and it also, but often I'll just go, nah, I'm just going to include it, and I'll fix it when I'm done.
What's a period or an era in history that you find particularly interesting right now?
Well, the one I'm writing about right now, which is Austro-Hungary, in the 18, under the rule of the Habsburgs. I think it's pretty fascinating. Um, uh, what else? Like what do I have on the docket? After that, I'm probably gonna, like, the book I write after that is probably gonna be a book set in my hometown, Little Rock, in the 80s, right in the time that I was in high school, which, that was 30 years ago. It is technically historical fiction. I'll still have to be like, what was it? I'll still have to go back and figure out what it was like. The one after that will probably be written in the 50s. At some point, I have a, what are some of the other books I'm going to write? You know, I, at one point I wanted to write a book about Hernando de Soto and his sort of end days that were in Arkansas. He died in Arkansas, and
Really?
yeah. He looking for the seven cities of gold. He got as far as like Conway, and
Wow.
he died. He spent a winter on the shores of the Arkansas River at Conway, and he got sick, and his men were like, oh shit, we got to get him out of here and back into the Gulf of Mexico, where he could be picked up and taken back to Cuba, which was where the Spaniards had their sort of outpost. He was literally the governor of Cuba, and he died on the way or around there. Anyway, I wanted to write a book about that, right?
Yeah.
And so I've done research on that, but there's a lot of things I'm interested in, but I didn't really enjoy writing something in modern day. And I might write something modern day just for the ease of not having to research it. And I've been wanting to I've been wanting to write sort of a Stephen King-esque small town America horror book. But I don't know how I'd do that in modern day. I don't know. I'm playing with it. I got lots of ideas.
That's something I noticed is that you were just rattling off like, oh, I want to write a book here, and I want to write a book there, and that's just, it's very cool to hear you just sort of rattle off. I'm working on a book right now, but here are 50 more that I have just tumbling like a dryer.
I mean, I wrote a it's funny. It's like I wrote 60,000 words towards a novel, I guess 3 years ago, that was set, and I still need to return to it. It's like a ghost story set in southeastern Arkansas in 1927, right at the time of the Great Flood, and sort of it was set between 1927 and 1957,
Mm-hmm.
And it was so ambitious, and I realized how long it was going to take me to write it, because it was just like, it was like one of those books that you used to read and used to get in like the 70s that were like multi-generational books. You know what I'm talking about? Like, and on the cover it would be like John Jakes or something, like that was the name of a real author, despite its similarity to my name. It'd be like Plainsman, like the cover would be like a oil painting of like Plainsman,
Mm-hmm.
but then in sort of like in a collage, but then behind them it would be like, you would see like a man and a woman dressed in like 20s garb, and then and then it would be like a modern dude with sunglasses on, and they'd all be collaged together. So
Mm-hmm.
you could see that it was like all these generations. I don't know if you remember, that was like a whole thing in the 70s and 80s, these multi-generational books. And I was thinking about trying to, that one would be kind of like that, a couple of generations but it didn't peter out. It was just so ambitious and so big that I realized I had to write something else and get it done beforehand.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I've never returned to it. Like, so I've got this sort of like half or third of a novel just sitting there that I've not returned to. It's the first thing I've ever sort of stopped writing on, and I really like it. I love the period. I love the characters. I actually stopped writing it to start writing the first short novel of The Lush and Seething Hell.
So I know that you, outside of writing, you are incredibly creative. You were in a band in your 20s and 30s. You work for an ad agency, and I know that you've done some animation, some graphic design.
I'm actually a junior partner at an ad agency. I own part of the ad agency.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, what are some artistic pursuits that you do besides writing?
Right now, if I just turn my camera, you can see my work desk. Like, I am currently working on illustrating the book that I'm with lino cuts. So I'm working on illustrating the book that I am writing. And a lino cut, for those people who don't know, hold on, is where you take a design and you put it on a piece of linoleum, and then you carve away the positive or the negative values, leaving only the positive, and then you ink it, and you can make multiple prints, right? So that's what I'm working on, like with this book. My agent seems to think we'll be able to sell it. I have one of my artist friends. I asked him. I sent him like a PDF of all the sort of woodcuts that I've been working on, and I was like, "Look, is this good enough to be in a book?" He's like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "Yeah, it's good enough. I mean, it's you. It's like you, I look at that and I see like you. That's your style. I mean, it's not. I'm not. The interesting thing about doing the lino cuts is it's very much like writing a novel in the sense that it is a process. So it's like, figuring out what I'm gonna do, the scene. So part of it. This is like one of them, right? I don't know. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is so the process of doing a lino cut in some ways is a lot more rewarding than writing because it's a shorter process. That's one of the things I do love about working in an advertising agency is while a lot of the work I do in an advertising agency is not that creative. It is creating things like when I do animations, those are creative. The point from inception to end is like real short, so it's like the creation process is quick, and then it's out the door, and you have the satisfaction of it being out the door. This takes a little bit longer. It's like figuring out the scene I want to do, then working on the composition through like small sketches,
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of like like figuring out like on this one, I wanted to figure out how to make this. So the book I'm writing is a vampire novel, right? And, it's Dracula adjacent. Let's just call it that. And I wanted it to sort of evoke the era, right? I wanted it to be creepy. I wanted it to. I needed to like figure out like if this, like what would be appropriate in her dress, like what like the houses, like would they like, I don't know if you can see the housing at the bottom, but like what that would, I had to get like reference photos and.
Yeah.
And ultimately, some of it was like this. All this part was like me, like literally getting photos of like houses in Romania and photoshopping them into a document, and then drawing what I saw, like, and then putting a figure here as a reference, and then drawing it, right? But it was like a Photoshop document, and then me sketching the Photoshop document,
Sure.
and then so the next step was because when you do a relief print, everything is reversed when you print it. It was me taking my drawing, scanning it into my computer, flipping it, and then printing out multiple sheets that I lay upon one large piece, like trimming it, and then putting down carbon paper, and then putting down my scanned reversed drawing and putting it down there, and then getting a pen and inking it really hard so that the carbon transfers onto the linoleum,
Mm-hmm.
and then pulling the drawing on top and the carbon paper off, and seeing the sort of faint tracery of my original drawing on the linoleum. So so at that point, I have made it, like, figured out what I'm going to do, like figured out the content of the drawing and the composition.
Mm-hmm.
I have composed it, drawn it, scanned it, and got it on there. And then I have to ink that in again on the linoleum. And then once that's done, you carve it away, right? And then from there, you can make a print, and you ink up the block, and then you put the paper on it. Grant, it's a long. The way I do it is a long process. If I was a better artist, like if I was like a real pro, I could skip all that shit and just conceive it in my brain and then draw it like in a pencil on the linoleum and then ink it in. But I'm not that good. I'm not there. But I have standards enough where I want it to look that good, right? So that's how I get it. Anyway, so there's something great about lino cuts that it takes, like, even my hand art, which isn't terrible, but it's not like the level that I wish it was. Again, and it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing I was talking about in writing. Whereas I have an idealized image in my head about what it should look like, and then the product, how far away from the ideal and in what the product is am I missing, right? And anyway, but there's something that happens interesting in cutting it away from the in the linoleum and physically cutting out the design in the linoleum. It kind of elevates my art. Like, it makes it look better. It makes it look older and sharper all at once. It gives it this sort of antiquated feel, but also, like, I don't know. It just does something. In that last part of cutting it away, does something that makes it look better, and it's so rewarding because you're working with your hands, you're cutting stuff away. I got this magnifying glass light, and I'm just like over it. It's just I love the process of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what I'm doing now. Like the other thing. Now I play guitar. I haven't really been doing a lot recently, but I play guitar, pretty regularly. One of the things that, when I stopped playing with other musicians just because of life, I still do occasionally, but my best friend, who is my sort of drummer through life, died, and so that sort of killed my sort of like real pursuit of music.
I'm sorry.
I am too, but I'm not, so, like, we were high school best friends. We roomed together in college. We played in bands through our 20s and 30s. I mean, he was just like not only my best friend, he was just like, my musical partner. He was an amazing drummer. So when he died, it was just like, I felt sort of lost. I mean, I still play the guitar. Currently, one of the best things I learned to do was, like, get a loop pedal and sort of play a little bit on my loop pedal and, like, make a loop that then I can sort of play, excuse the phrasing, but play with myself. And that helps. I haven't done that in a while, but I do it pretty regularly. Yeah. So I do that. That's about it. And then every day I'm at work designing stuff like logos and animations, and all I ever really, I mean, when I was a kid, all I ever really wanted to do was be creative and get paid for it.
That's
And
awesome. It's awesome that you're doing that.
Yeah, I'm lucky to do it.
when you were younger, you said you were a compulsive reader and you read things a lot and very quickly. Um, do you still read as much as you did? Or do you find you read as fast as you did, or?
No, God, no. I No. Once I started writing, and once I started getting paid to write, and once I started realizing that everything I would write, not everything, but most everything, it's more than likely it'll see print somewhere. Like, more than likely. I started taking myself seriously. Also, my tolerance for certain fiction just dried up. I just like and also my personal approach to fiction I read was very guarded in the sense that, or not just guarded, it was very mercenary.
Mhm.
So when I would read, I would be like, what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Okay, like, let's just, let's look at this on a pacing level. Let's look at this on a style level. Um, and so I was really looking at it and like, what could I extract from the book to, like, then, sort of like, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but like Borg wise, like incorporate into the Borg collective that is me in my writing.
Yeah.
And it kind of like dried up the enthusiasm for books for me, because it was like a very, like I really would hate to be a person that looks at other people like that. And there are people out there that are just like, what can this person do for me? What can I get out of them? How can I, and it's just like a joyless way of dealing with people or fiction. And I still tend to do it, but I try to get books, but consequently, a book has to be really, really good to break me out of that mercenary gaze. And the ones that do, I'm just like, oh my God, thank you for like getting me out of that,
Mm-hmm.
and like, because I know the tricks. I know I do this too. I know the things you're trying to pull on me. I know, like, if you can get past my defenses, you are really good, and so a lot of my enjoyment of reading dried up until I really started realizing that, and I started focusing on historical fiction, that research. I really enjoy reading nonfiction books, and that there are nonfiction books that are written in so well that it's exciting and informative and entertaining as reading a novel. But
Mm-hmm.
the great thing is, like, this really happened. This isn't just some dude like me. He's like imagining. This is real. This is real stuff.
Right.
And so once I started really getting more into nonfiction, I yeah, I've enjoyed reading again. I've also been like really trying to read more poetry, because one, poets need support, you know, um, and two, I want to see if it can inform my fiction more. Um, just like they do so much with so few words. There's a great economy to the two sort of highest forms of writing are poetry and short stories. Uh, when it comes to, I don't even know if you'd call poetry fiction, but I'm going to say it's fiction. But like the sort of highest art form of fiction is the short story, because it's so demanding a form. It's just so short. There's just no words can be wasted, and so I like reading short stories because. I'm not a very good short story writer. I'm good at writing novels and long things that give me sort of all the room I need to sort of spread out and sort of explore. And short stories are like, yeah, no, you don't get that. Do it. 3, 2, 1, go. And it's like you have to do that. So yeah, but most and I have certain go-to authors that I always like. That I know is going to be able to get through my defenses.
Mm-hmm. What is something that's made you happy recently? it can be anything. Like it can be a show. It can be like a thing that you've done.
Uh, I mean, as far as the show goes, my kid and I just watched all of Kipo and the Wonder Beasts, and it was just a great, like, the best animated children's show of all time is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Okay, period.
Yep.
People could say no, it's not, and I'd be like, well, you're dumb and wrong. But that is the greatest show. But I will say Kipo and the Wonder Beast is a close second or third. We watched it and it's really good. I've been enjoying that. Um, you know, I'm looking around. What has given me joy? I mean, my everyday walk gives me joy. Like I look forward to every day. I walk about 3 or 4 miles. It's at lunch, and it's like a mental health thing because I work. I now work from home for the past 8. So since March, I think March 14th was our last day in the office.
I think that's my last day too.
Yeah. So, I've really been, it's screwed up because I never exercised in my 20s, occasionally in my 30s. And in my 40s, I started like actually paying attention to it. And now that I'm approaching 50, like I'm really, not like I'm like really into like the culture of exercise, but I really understand how essential it is for my mental well-being and just like my sleep and just like all the sort of the little components that go into like feeling good. Like I feel better, everything hurts less even though it hurts more but like in different places. Anyway, that I enjoy that. I watch a lot of horror movies. I write horror. I like horror. So
yeah, I saw your shirt. It's an awesome shirt, by the way.
Yeah. I really enjoy not Fangoria, Shutter, my Shutter subscription. I mean, and when a book gets through, like right now, Hilary Mantel's last book in the Cromwell saga is hitting on all cylinders for me. I mean, that makes me happy. Other than that, I eat one meal a day. Like I don't eat until dinner because I live a sedentary life. I take a walk at lunch. I drink a lot of water. I take supplements, and then at dinner I eat. And I look forward. When you only eat one meal a day, you really, really look forward to that meal, and that meal is always awesome. It's always like I can't understand how I could have went through life eating 3 meals a day and then being like dissatisfied. This meal sucks. I didn't like that burger. It's like, man, eat 1 meal a day and everything you eat is good.
That I bet.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you sitting down and just chatting with me. I did not intend to go this long.